Hello, welcome back to this utter nonsense. First, let me just say that I know the topic of this video is rather obscure, so thank you for clicking through anyway. Today, I want to talk to you about Sword Art Online, a little-known anime back from the early 2010s. If you've been around the anime scene for long enough, then you might have heard about it. I think one or two YouTubers made videos about it back in the day. Alright, I'll drop the act. Everybody and their mother has made a video on Sword Art Online. It's kind of like the internet's anime punching bag. People say that it's awful, that it's boring, that it single-handedly ruined anime by being the reason that we get so many trash isekai every season. Like, seriously, what the fuck is this? Japan? Really? So what, you might be wondering, could I possibly hope to add to this landscape of anime YouTube littered with videos about Sword Art Online? Simply put, very few people have tried to fix the damn thing. Because I'm about to make a controversial statement. The Aincrad arc of Sword Art Online isn't actually bad? A fact that I shockingly discovered upon rewatch for this very video. Don't get me wrong, it certainly isn't good either, but it somehow manages to pull some very good moments out of its ass. The main problem that I found is while the scene-to-scene writing isn't necessarily awful, the structure of SAO feels like it was constructed solely out of duct tape and pipe cleaners. So, here I come, the almighty storyteller from on high to descend from the heavens to bless you all with the gift of fixing it for you. Because fuck all those other opinions, this is the one true way to fix this train wreck and... Okay, joke's already old. First and foremost, I do not claim that this is the one and only way to fix SAO. In fact, this video's very existence is proof to the contrary. For my rewatch of the first arc of the series, I sat down with the boy toy, that's Dragon.
What's up, fucker?
To hear his thoughts, and he had a lot of completely different things to say than I did. I didn't agree with all of them, of course, but some I liked enough that they made it into this video, and some of his thoughts were frankly just better than mine. So yeah, this is kind of technically a group project, but I'm gonna take all the credit anyway. Regardless, there are as many ways to improve this series as there are people, but this is not about them. This is about me. That was a joke. I was joking. Also, I'd like to introduce you to some little friends of mine. I'll be trying to stick to the general structure of the show, but in the times that I don't, these buddies will be helping me demonstrate the scenes. I don't see the point in stalling anymore, so let's bury ourselves in the mud and get our hands dirty. Because there's a lot of shit in here. First, for all the 8-year-olds out there that really shouldn't be watching these videos, but for some reason are anyway, let's cover the background. Sword Art Online was originally a web novel published by then first-time writer Reki Kawahara all the way back in 2002. Later on, when publisher Dengeki Bunko picked up his other work Excel World, they suggested publishing his first novel as well, turning it into the light novel series we know today. Now, I'm throwing a lot of terms around here, and I'm not really an anime analysis channel per se, so I don't expect everyone watching to know all this stuff. So for reference, a light novel is basically the Japanese equivalent of young adult fiction here in the West, but the books are shorter and come out more frequently, resembling manga production more than the usual novel process. Anyway, eventually in 2012, 10 whole years after the initial web novel, A1 Pictures picked up the IP and Sword Art Online became a full-blown anime. Now, at the time at least, A1 Pictures kind of had a, let's say, reputation. The McDonald's of anime was a term that got thrown around a lot. They were infamous for overworking their animators and employees. One person worked over 600 hours in 1 month, which means this guy spent 83% of his total time on this earth during that month working. As far as the product quality, they were notoriously hit or miss. The problem was that they had very little in-house staff and largely relied on outside and freelance help, pulling in different directors and scriptwriters and especially animators to work on specific projects, which kind of made the quality of their shows all over the place. I say was only because all of this info is pretty old. Most allegations came out around 2014, so I can't say for certain what the work climate there is right now. But this all was certainly relevant around the time of SAO's conception, so I'm just laying it out there. For better or worse, Sword Art Online released in July of 2012, and what it left in its wake was interesting, to say the least. I wasn't really online at the time, at least not in an actual social capacity, but from what I've gathered from the irradiated aftermath, it kind of made the anime community lose its mind. For a little while, SAO was king of the hill, but then the counterculture took over and people started shitting on it. While this does happen with nearly every popular anime to some extent, in this case, a lot of the criticisms actually proved to be valid, and SAO was dethroned. It's been the joy of lonely 13-year-old boys and the bane of everyone else ever since. If you cut out the weird trailer for the show you're already watching at the very beginning, episode 1's first scene isn't all that bad. In fact, this whole first episode isn't really all that bad, but the first scene stands out as belonging to an entirely different show. We learn diegetically through internet articles and voiceover news reports that a brand new full-body VR experience called the Nerve Gear has just released, with one current hot release title called Sword Art Online. Roll credits! This exposition is all delivered quickly and efficiently, and in a manner that makes us feel like we're getting a glimpse into this world instead of being preached at. This is all done in a matter of seconds, and we very quickly cut away to our main character, or at least our main character's lower face. Now, what I'm about to say is not a canon interpretation of what the creators were trying to demonstrate with this scene. I think the original purpose was to compare the real world as being rather mundane and lifeless when put up against the likes of a crazy magical adventure, but bear with me. What the visual language of this scene is telling me is that Kirito is severely depressed. Think about it. His world, here represented by his bedroom, is gray and lifeless. When his sister tries to communicate with him, it's through a physical object, his bedroom door. Most of all, when Kirito cuts his finger, he looks down at it with more curiosity than pain. Like, this dude is disassociating so hard right now. What all of this is telling me, at least, is this is how Kirito is feeling. Everyone around him feels far off and distant, he himself feels numb and cold, and the world is boring. The first time in this entire sequence that he puts on a facial expression is when he sticks the nerve gear on his head. Like I said, from what I'm aware, Kirito being depressed is never really a part of the story, and in an interview back in 2013, Reki Kawahara claimed that he put nothing of himself into Kirito. But I am calling bullshit right here and now. I am a writer, I know this stuff. Writers always put something of themselves into their works, whether they realize it or not. Reki Kawahara was a lonely nerd playing video games when he first wrote SAO, and I can almost guarantee you that Kirito being depressed is something that makes so much sense, even if it's not explicitly stated. His whole character arc is about learning to love and trust people, for God's sake. Anyway, that rant had a point, I promise, which is the first major change to the story that we're going to make. A lot of the reason why people call Kirito a Mary Sue is because he really doesn't have a satisfying character arc. He gets sad and broody for a while, but then he meets Asuna and he's back to being an overpowered badass again. So we are going to commit the cardinal sin of indie video games and make it all about depression. Luckily for us, this isn't an indie game, so it's totally fine. We are going to make Kirito into a character an audience would like to root for by making one simple change, which is to make him change. This does happen in the original, but not to the extent to make it effective. We are going to start Kirito out as a sad, lonely bastard who finds solace in video games, only to find that solace taken away from him when he's trapped in one, so that he's forced to make connections with people that can help him see the good sides of the world. It's not necessarily the most original character arc, but one that always resonates well with the age range that this show is marketed towards, and if handled well, then with most other people besides. So, yeah, this scene should be drawn out just a fraction of a minute longer in order for us to really feel the tension and to build some foreshadowing that we're going to cash in on later, and let's move on. Kirito sticks the thing on his head, and after a shot of the system starting to build anticipation, we, from Kirito's perspective, awaken in the world of Sword Art Online. And my first impression of this game is that the starting area is fucking boring. And also, look at that fucking circular-ass city structure! This is it! This is where it came from! Although the shot of the whole structure is pretty cool. Anyway, he meets up with Klein shortly thereafter, and everything about the training scene is pretty alright. It's a good introduction to Klein and his personality, Kirito and his personality, and the basics of the game system. Although to us as the audience, it still mostly reads as nonsense. In a different anime, I would absolutely suggest taking the time to explain these game systems carefully, but SAO is really not about the logistics of game design. Its game setting is utilized more as a backdrop for cool fantasy adventures, so I'll let it slide. This scene does a lot of important work in a very short amount of time, and it's pretty good. One thing that I would change is how the characters talk to each other. It'd be nice if at some point the conversation veered away from the essentials of the game, even for just a moment. Throughout the series, Kirito develops close relationships with several of the characters, including Klein, and it's weird that although he is counted in the friend squad, it never seems like him and Kirito really bond all that much. Kirito can certainly start the scene standoffish. He's an awkward, depressed teenager in our version after all, but Klein is a little ray of sunshine, and so Kirito should open up to him by the end of the scene. It would be a really good way to demonstrate that as soon as the conversation veers away from games, that Kirito becomes really awkward. It is here where we realize that the games will now, in fact, never stop. Klein tries to log out of the game, discovers that he can't, and... Wait, what the fuck kind of pizza is that? Klein, are you okay, buddy? Anyway, the two panic for a second, both realizing that without the logout button, there's basically no way for them to get out of the VR by themselves. One would think that a company would never be able to get away with programming a device like that, but just don't think too hard about it. Then they are transported back to the town square, and the big scene of the episode happens. The lighting here is really good. I like how it transitions from a gentle sunset to some really sinister, harsh yellow and orange tones. A system announcement begins, and the sky drips blood? I think that one might be a little too edgy, Chief. Takes me right out of the moment. Though when I was 12, I thought it was really cool, so who am I to say? The rest of the episode is essentially this robed figure, implied to be the creator of the game Akihiko Kayaba, telling the players down below the dealio. They are now stuck in this MMORPG, and if they die in the game, they die in real life. Wow, that phrase just flashed me right back to YouTube 2016. The abridged version makes fun of how impossible that is, and I'm right there with them. I think in general that its setting as an MMO should be utilized more as a tool of disheartenment to the players, instead of its difficulty. Because MMOs are grindy as all get out. Most quests are boring ass kill 10 spiders affairs, and beyond the first 10 levels or so, leveling up is exceptionally tedious. I also think that Kayaba should have at least a little hint of a motive here. All he really does is dryly explain their fate and then leave. In fact, Kayaba just needs a motive in general. I will talk about this in extensive detail later, but for now, we need to have some mystery. As it stands, the only question we have is, why would you do this? But we can open up so many more interesting questions by giving an inkling as to his reasoning behind this. Whether that be that he's crazy, it's an ideology thing, or he's bribing someone doesn't matter at the moment, just give us a little something to work with. After much debate, though we agreed that a specific motivation would ultimately be more interesting, Dragon and I decided that there simply was not enough runtime to dedicate to Kayaba's whole motivation and backstory. So it would be best in our version for Kayaba to have a god complex / ideological reason for trapping 10,000 people in a video game. Again, more on this later. The one other thing Kayaba does in this scene is he forces the players to wear their own faces. I think it's great how they focus briefly on a pretty girl actually being a creepy weirdo, but I think for this to make any sense why Kayaba bothers, it needs to be done a little more. I think that Kirito's avatar appearance needs to have a stronger distinction to his actual one. In canon SAO, he's taller, his face is thinner, and his hair is longer, and that's about it. I also think Kirito should be way more uncomfortable with his actual face now being seen by all these strangers. In our version, he's a lonely weeb, and ripping that convenient mask off of his face is not something he asked for. Even though he is depressed in our version, we never want to just come out and state it, and this is a really easy and effective way to show how uncomfortable he is with himself very quickly. It could also be used as a better motivation for him to not join up with Klein and his friends. In the original, Kirito wants to get to the next village as quickly as possible because the resources in an MMO are limited, which is really weird. MMOs are kinda known for their nearly immersion-breaking recreation of resources and quests. He only carries on alone after Klein insists on meeting up with his friends, and Kirito thinks they'll slow him down. Instead, we're going to have Klein be the one again insisting that Kirito sticks with the group for safety, but Kirito is too embarrassed by now being revealed to be much younger than Klein and having his face seen to accept the offer. Also, is Klein implied to be gay here, or is that just me? Could be cool. Would be fun to make that canon. I don't know. We'll put a pin in Klein for now, however, because I have a lot more to say about him later. With Kirito shedding a tear as he moves on to the next area, which makes a lot more sense now in our version, the episode ends, and we move on to episode 2. Okay, so I'm going to quickly summarize this episode and then make my changes because these are going to be way more fundamental than the first episode. So far, the pacing's been pretty decent, but here's where the first cracks start to show. It'll get way worse after this one. The episode opens with Kirito narrating that a month has passed in the game, 2,000 people are dead, and they still haven't beaten the first floor. Some of the players decide to hold an organized meeting about defeating the boss. This is headed up by someone named Diabel, who claims to know about the boss from a book that was put together by the original beta testers, of which Kirito is one. Some jackass complains that the beta testers are elitist because they abandoned the other players and didn't help them, but is pretty quickly shut down. Diabel tells the raid group to split up into parties, but Kirito is a solo and doesn't have anyone to pair up with. He ends up finding another solo and they join a party together. He learns via the menu that her username is Asuna. Cut away after far too long, and the two of them share a cute scene where Kirito gives her some special butter to put on her bread as they eat a meal. Afterwards, the raid begins. Diabel has a small speech he gives before everyone goes in to fight the boss. All things considered, the raid goes pretty well, though not without its casualties. Once the boss is almost dead, Diabel rushes forward to finish it off, but the boss has changed its attack pattern since the beta, and he gets dealt a fatal wound. Kirito lovingly holds him in his arms as he refuses a health potion and dies. Like an idiot. Kirito and Asuna finish off the boss together, but Kirito gets the final blow in and receives a snazzy coat as a reward. At first, the raid party celebrates, but soon the crowd turns against Kirito when they find out he's a beta tester. Kirito gives an edgelord villain speech and climbs up to the second floor, leaving Asuna in his dust. What an asshole. So there are several problems with this episode, and overall, I think it's one of the weaker individual ones, though the fight scene at the end will probably distract your average viewer enough to make it stick in their brains. First and foremost, the opening narration. I'm calling bullshit on the fact that it's been a whole month and nobody has beaten the first floor yet. We have people beating Dark Souls with their feet, and you're telling me that in a whole month with nothing else to do, that no one has beaten this floor yet? The first floor? So, yeah, let's lower that time down to 2 weeks. Maybe lower the death count just a little too. 2,000 is literally a fifth of the player base, and everyone knows that the first area of an MMO is easy as shit. Sure, we're going off the basis that this one's a little harder than your average grindathon, but we need something to raise the stakes later on, and 1,000 is still a pretty insane number. This shot of the board of players actually happens at the end of the first episode, but if we move it to the beginning of the second, there's no need for Kirito's narration. For this episode, we're changing the beginning entirely, and this is how we're going to cut down on the long exposition scene. Instead of having Diabel just tell all these players about how his party found the boss, hey, here's an idea, maybe actually show him doing that? But if we get away from Kirito for even a second, the edgelord ADD teenagers will get bored and leave. Hey, give those kids some credit. As long as there's blood and or tits on the screen, they'll be fine. We're going to follow Diabel and his party getting through the dungeon and running into this thing. It would be a pretty simple setup. You start with the cold open of the party wandering through the dungeon, drop a small amount of dialogue to set up who these guys are, then the big boss door that this anime is so fond of using opens, and some jerk-off runs in before the rest of the party, promptly getting murked by the boss as he makes a half debut. We don't have to see entirely what he looks like, just maybe some sharp fangs, glowing eyes, and a hulking build. Perfect! Done! Roll credits! After credits roll, we should cut to where the episode actually starts, Kirito heading to the meeting. Instead of him monologuing to us though, just have him pass some people talking about the meeting. Easy. We feel like a part of the world instead of being told about it. This could also be a point to drop in a little info about Diabel. My main problem with his character in the anime is that he's given a lot of authority and power without anybody telling us who the fuck this guy is. I think in order to really be considered someone for people to look up to, he needs to have a reputation. Maybe he's a well-known raid leader from a different game or games, just some reason that people would trust him to lead this first raid. So let's imply that Kirito at least knows who this guy is, and that's why he's even bothering heading to this meeting in the first place, since he's supposed to be this cool loner. So now we've successfully cut down on the exposition time because we already know that his party found the boss. Everything else about this scene can stay the same. Only note I'd like to add is that there's no diegetic reason for Asuna to be hiding her face. All it serves is to reveal later that she's a cute girl. I'd suggest something along the lines of what Kirito has already gone through, something like she doesn't want people to see her real face maybe. This is one that I don't have an answer for, so I'll make a note of it and move on. The scene with the bread is cute and I think shows us a nicer set of Kirito than we've seen so far. It stays. The next set of problems I see are in the raid sequence, and again, a lot of them have to do with Diabel. Minor point, but I think his speech before the final boss needs to be a little longer. All he says now is basically, have fun, don't die! It doesn't have to be the Battle of Helm's Deep or anything, but a little extra would be nice. Next, we're going to cut to when he tries to make the final blow. Why does he do this? While he's talking to Kirito right before he dies, he says that he was trying to get the item and that he was also a beta tester. But the order in which these events are made apparent is really, really weird, and the tone is all wrong. For someone who is hiding his identity and selfishly going for the item at the end, his death scene is very much played like he's some kind of a martyr. So instead, we're going to reveal this a little earlier. When he goes to attack the boss, Kirito will ask him what the hell he's doing, and Diablo will respond, "You know what? I want the item." Also, he shouldn't lovingly die in Kirito's arms, refusing a health potion like he's being noble or something. What other people could use it? It's a damn health potion. You are literally going to die, you dumbass! Yeah, so he should just be immediately killed. No chance at saving him. Without that sequence, his true motivations and personality can become a little more murky, while not utterly destroying this perception of him as a strong leader type. After all of this, the episode can pretty much proceed as normal. Kirito can even have his little bitch baby edgelord speech, but with one more important change. In the original, he claims that he was the beta tester who got the farthest in the entire game. He should still say this, but on the stairs later on, when Asuna confronts him, she should ask, "Hey, did you really get the farthest?" And here, he will instead deny it and tell her the truth, that it was actually Diabel. In the original, it's implied that Kirito is making this whole villain speech so that people will hate him, so that they have something to pin their hatred on. In our version, now he has a reason to do it, to preserve Diabel's legacy, to make him a martyr, not a backstabber. Pretty small, but important, as this will make it clear that Kirito really couldn't give a shit about himself. Also, it can act as a pseudo "oh shit" moment when you realize that the guy who had the best chance of success is now dead. On the first floor. Like in the original, Kirito will climb the stairs to the second floor, and the episode ends. Okay. This is where shit really makes me mad. Upon my first ever viewing of SAO, this is the episode that made me drop it. And the worst part is, it's not because it does anything particularly egregious, it's simply that it contains the most horribly executed time skip known to man. So, you know how we were just super hyped to see what was on the second floor, and that was what the entire end of the last episode was building up to? Well, surprise! At the very beginning of this episode, we're on floor 11. No explanation, no transition, just here we are. Floor 11, Black Cat's Guild. Which immediately means I do not give a single shit about these motherfuckers. They mean nothing to me. I am left, alone and confused, wallowing in a new time, a new place, without any context. I wonder, for the first several minutes, if they're ever going to flash back to what happened after Kirito opened the door to the second floor. You know, like any sane narrative would, but no! We're just here now, and you'd better get used to it! This episode is dedicated to Kirito's encounter with the Moonlit Black Cats, a super small guild consisting of some college buddies that got stuck in the game together. He ends up agreeing to join the guild, even hiding his level, which is much higher than theirs, in order to not cause waves. He helps them learn to fight better, grinds with them for a little while, etc. The only really important character here is Sachi, the cute girl who should be tanking at the front of the party, but is too scared. "Oh, Kirito, you're so big and strong, please protect me!" She understandably is horrified over the fact that, she could die here, and a lot of time is dedicated to her brain space. About halfway through the episode, Kirito leads the group, with their leader mysteriously absent, into a dungeon where one of them falls into a stupid trap that Kirito could have prevented because he knew the layout of the dungeon already, and they all end up dying because Kirito is one guy who can't protect them all. Thus begins Kirito's real edgelord phase, and the rest of the episode is dedicated to some random-ass Christmas-themed side quest that might give you an item that can resurrect people. Kirito goes in, kicks ass, and gets the item, but obviously you can't use it to resurrect people who've been killed IRL, you dumb bastard! So he gets all sad and depressed and stuff and listens to a recording that Sachi left him before she died. Okay. There's a lot to unpack here. First, I don't think the story should take place on the 11th floor. I think it should take place on floor 2. It doesn't have to start immediately after Kirito walks through the door, but we certainly need to see his first impressions of the next floor, whatever it may look like. Then we can hard cut to exactly where the original episode started, just now on the second floor, and obviously with Kirito not hiding his level. Instead, let's utilize the obvious and have him hide the fact that he was a beta tester. Easy breezy. We've already established that people have a lot of suspicion about beta testers, a lot of which was encouraged by Kirito himself. The montage of the guild getting better and stronger should also coincide with their climb up the next couple of floors. In the original, this is where the first mention of the bigger guilds on the front lines is, so this is a good place to mention that that's happening in the background, and the Black Cats are quickly falling behind. Maybe they're in the dungeon where they die in the first place because Kirito begins to pressure them to go a little faster. This is a much better reason for him to feel beat up about their deaths afterward and want to distance himself from people. Also, the weird Santa Claus after bit should be heavily cut down. I don't know where it would fit in, maybe even right at the beginning of the episode to build intrigue about who Kirito's trying to resurrect before cutting back to the second floor. Wherever it is, the only thing that I think is really important about that scene is that Kirito briefly forgets that this is real life and thinks he could resurrect someone with an item in a video game. That seems pretty important to his character, and the fact that his only solace is in the world of games. Regardless, cutting down good old Saint Nick will give us more space to dedicate to these exceptionally important characters whom we're supposed to care about by the end of the episode. I think the intention originally is that we're supposed to care that Kirito cares that these guys are dead, but I don't give a shit about Kirito. This is the arc that's supposed to make me care about Kirito, but it doesn't because I don't sympathize with him. I don't really care about the people that he got killed. And honestly, the best solution is to take a couple extra minutes we lopped off at the end and just give them some time to breathe. Sachi, I think, gets enough screen time, but we just need to know more about the rest of these guys. I literally don't remember a single one of their names, and I know they told me. Give me some fun facts, quirks, anything to make me remember you so that I at least give a little bit of a shit by the time you all die. I'm not gonna name any specifics because this could be anything, but show us all of that and more of how they interact together. Making them seem like a real team full of real people will make it so much more awful when they start dying one by one. So there's one more twist that I forgot to mention earlier. It's stated in a flashback towards the end of the episode in about 10 seconds that after the disastrous raid while he was away, the leader of the group committed fucking suicide when Kirito confessed to him that he was a beta tester. Jesus Christ, dude, what the hell? Even for seppuku, that's really hardcore. So yeah, maybe don't do that. I think the tragedy should come from Kirito not being able to step up as a leader, even when the leader of the party is doing something that will be disastrous, especially if he doesn't know it. Kirito's inability to open up to others should be the reason for his failure, even if this isn't the lesson that he'll take from it right away. Because the lesson he takes should be the same as the one in the original. This is something that the original actually did very well. Kirito as a character thinks that he failed because he was too weak to save everybody, when in reality it was his inability to communicate that caused him to do so. That's really good. Let's emphasize that a little more and keep chugging along Kirito's pain train. It actually gets kind of better from here. Right, so as you'll see, I have less to say about this episode than the others so far, so I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the most major change to this series that I'd like to make. I'd like to get rid of the half-assed harem. Now, I'm stating for the record here that while they usually make me a little uncomfortable because they're, essentially about collecting members of my gender like they're fucking Pokemon, I don't actually have a problem with harems. My only problem lies when they're included in a show that otherwise doesn't need or support it. Do you know how many times I got cock-blocked by a show that I thought was going to be a super cool steampunk thriller, only to be tricked into watching big melon bazongas practically leaping through the screen and onto my 13-year-old face? Does that seem oddly specific? Clockwork Planet? Sword Art Online doesn't need a harem. It already has an actually really well-written romance, and the harem, as the internet has already been joking about for years, is simply demoted to a spurned women's club because Reki Kawahara didn't have the balls to write a light novel without a harem. Simply put, it is really difficult to include both a harem and a well-developed romance in one story. Even SAO OST, the writer of the Monogatari franchise and one of the greatest writers of our modern age, struggled with the balance a lot. Having the harem cheapens the romance, and having the romance makes the harem really awkward. So, now we have two options. Trim off the weird little growth on the toe of the story that is the harem, or have to go in with a knife and cut out the romantic heart. Yeah, I think we're gonna go with the harem. Now you might be saying, but Hedgehog, the Aincrad arc doesn't even have a harem. Yeah, well, knowing the internet, I'm probably going to be forced to do the rest of SAO after this, so I'm setting up a good platform for myself, okay? It's fully formed by the Gun Gale arc, which with all the SAO out now is still pretty early in. That being said, this episode is about Kirito helping a random lolly and future harem member resurrect her dead baby dragon. It serves no purpose to the greater plot other than introducing the fact that player killers exist, I guess. Silica's only purpose in this plot is to get naked and get groped by vines. Dude, come on guys. Listen, I know the target audience isn't that much older, but she's like 12, man. Of all the female characters in this show, why is she the one who has all the fan service? Gives me the fucking willies. I want to delete this whole episode, and I want to delete Silica. This time could be much better spent on developing already existing characters, like Klein. So, I forgot to mention before that Klein actually does appear briefly in episode 3, but it's in the shitty Christmas part, and it's only for about 5 seconds to show that he does, in fact, still exist, and to demonstrate just how edgy Kirito has become. Alright, so, restructuring time. There is something about this episode that I like, and that's the villain, Roselia. A player luring other players to be killed by her PK buddies while keeping her status pure is actually a pretty cool concept. So let's use her and this episode in general to strengthen the main plot instead of making it more bloated. Later on, we'll see that Asuna has become the second in command of the Knights of the Blood Oath, one of the biggest guilds in Aincrad and the main one on the front lines. But it all happened entirely off-screen and is just kind of in place at the start of episode 5. Instead, this episode is going to introduce us to the militarization of this guild. Asuna is still on Kirito's friends list, so let's say that around maybe floor 12 to 15, this is also a good time to start properly skipping floors since we have now established what they entail and are firmly placed in the world, a group of player killers have been causing trouble for the Knights, but if the Knights themselves investigate, then they'll just be putting a target on their backs. So as someone who wants to prove her usefulness and rise in the ranks, Asuna contacts Kirito and Klein, who as the leader of another guild on the front line she would presumably know, and asks them to investigate for her. Klein could either come equipped with some members of his guild to introduce as side characters or not, depending on what we want to do with them later. You can make the argument either way for safety in numbers or keeping the investigation on the down low. Kirito, of course, has to be really standoffish at first because of everything that, just happened to him, confusing Klein and making Asuna mad, which will, actually help to explain why she becomes a tsundere later on. So they do their investigating, maybe we see some new floors, have a couple of action scenes, but somewhere along the way they should run into Roselia, who would be posing as a helpless adventurer caught in an encounter she can't handle. They would save her, agree to help her find her party, and she would lead them into a trap. The final bit of the episode could happen almost exactly as it does in the original, with the twist being that since the death of the Black Cats, Kirito has been a grinding machine and is at a much higher level than he should be. This revelation will be stronger because instead of a random lolly, it's being had by Klein, who met Kirito when he was level 1, and also for us, because in our version, he hasn't been super over-leveled yet, whereas in the original, he has been since episode 2. You might be asking, what is the purpose of having Klein here instead of Silica? Alright. So the main problem I have with Klein in the original is that he keeps popping up and eventually becomes part of the Kirito friend squad, but he's never given any character development beyond the first episode. And yes, Klein doesn't need all that much time because he's a pretty straightforward guy, but he does need an episode in the spotlight to breathe a little. He's also the best person, being the resident ray of sunshine, to start Kirito's healing process. In the original, it's mostly time that does it, and then Asuna really completes it. But here, let's have Klein get the ball rolling. I'm picturing a scene where Klein finally confronts Kirito about what's shoved up his ass, and Kirito either confesses all and gets told that it wasn't all his fault that the Black Cats died, or he tells some and gets told that Klein will always be there for him if he needs it. Both are fine and serve the same purpose. It really just depends on how dramatic you want it to be. Also, I have been under the assumption that the PKs were actually Laughing Coffin in the original. This is false, and actually something that Abridged added, but it's a good change and we'll start hyping them up later, so we're keeping it. Now we are utilizing this episode for important story things instead of filler, which I think is something this plot really needed. With SAO's belt cinched up a bit, let's keep trucking along. Continued in part 2. Hello, it is me. I am back to advertise all of my things. So if you want to know what my qualifications are, or at least what I think my qualifications are for trying to fix an anime that a lot of people like, and a lot of people don't like, I have a series of original stories that I wrote on my other channel. There's a link in the description below. If you have any interest at all in reading a good story, I hope, follow that link. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, friends. I have a bunch of things. I have another channel that's got voice acting stuff on it. I have a Discord server that's full of weirdos who I hate. And I have a Patreon, which you can, follow and support me. So, yes. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I'll see you all in the next one. I'll also make an update video really soon about what this channel is now that I've released 2 videos on it. So thanks all for sticking around, even though there's not all that much on this channel yet. I'm trying really hard to pump out content really fast, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you. Have a good day.